Hey everyone, thanks for coming back. This is an original story from Hidden Revenge Family, and it took a turn you truly didn't see coming. Let's get into it.
The room didn't have windows. It never did. That was the point. I sat under cold fluorescent lights inside the Pentagon, staring at a classified file that didn't officially exist. Lines of encrypted data scrolled across my screen, each one tied to a decision that could get someone killed or keep them alive. No music, no distractions, just the low hum of secured systems and the quiet pressure of knowing mistakes here don't get second chances. I leaned back slightly, eyes still locked on the screen, replaying a satellite feed in my head while cross-checking coordinates. Something didn't line up. It rarely did on the first pass. My phone buzzed. Not my secure line, my personal one. I didn't need to look to know who it was. Arthur, I let it buzz once more before picking it up. A single message. Don't be late tonight. This actually matters. I stared at the screen for a second longer than necessary. Of course it mattered. Chloe was getting promoted. Again. I locked the phone without replying and turned back to my monitor. A few more clicks. A few more adjustments. I flagged an anomaly for follow-up and pushed the file into the next stage of review. Somewhere across the world, that decision would ripple through people who would never know my name. That was the job. I shut down my station, grabbed my coat, and stepped out into a hallway that looked exactly like every other hallway in the building. Clean, controlled, anonymous. By the time I reached the parking lot, I had already switched roles. From someone who handled classified intelligence to someone who apparently did nothing at all. The restaurant was loud before I even walked in. Private room, high-end, military crowd. You could tell by the posture alone. I stepped inside and immediately spotted my father at the center of it all. Arthur stood like he owned the room, one hand on a glass of whiskey, the other gesturing as he spoke to a group of officers hanging onto every word. And right beside him, Chloe, perfect uniform, perfect posture, perfect timing. She laughed at something someone said, just enough to seem humble, not enough to break the image. Metals caught the light every time she moved. Golden child, fully polished. I adjusted my sleeve and walked in quietly. No one noticed. That was normal. I found an empty seat near the side of the table and sat down without interrupting anything. A server passed by and I picked up a glass of water. Arthur didn't look at me. He didn't have to. Ignoring me had become second nature. Middle East deployment 6 months straight, he was saying, voice carrying across the table. You don't come back from that the same person. A few nods. Someone leaned forward. And those scars, he added, pointing lightly toward Chloe's arm. Earned. Every single one. Chloe gave a modest smile, lowering her gaze, like she hadn't heard that speech 100 times already. I took a sip of water, same script, different audience. One of the guests, a colonel I didn't recognize, turned slightly, his attention drifting across the table until it landed on me. Arthur, he said. Casually, you have another daughter, right? There it was. Arthur followed his gaze. For a brief second, his eyes met mine. No warmth, no recognition, just acknowledgement. Then he smiled. Not at me, at the colonel. Oh, her, he said with a small chuckle. I kept my expression neutral. She's not like Chloe. Of course not. The table leaned in just a little. Arthur took a sip of his drink, enjoying the moment more than he should have. She's just a desk worker, he continued. Types on a keyboard, organizes logistics files, paperwork stuff. A few polite laughs. He waved his hand dismissively. Useless job, honestly, especially in peacetime. The word useless landed exactly the way he intended it to. I tightened my grip around the glass, just slightly, not enough for anyone to notice. Except maybe someone who knew what to look for. I kept my eyes on the table, no reaction, no correction, because I couldn't. I couldn't say that 3 months ago, I was the one rerouting a drone strike that cleared a path out of an ambush. I couldn't say that Chloe's unit would have been wiped out without that call. I couldn't say that while he was bragging about her scars, I was the reason she lived long enough to get them. So I said nothing. The conversation moved on quickly like it always did. Chloe picked it up smoothly, shifting the attention back to her deployment. Stories, controlled details. Enough to impress, not enough to cross any lines. She was good at that. Arthur laughed louder than anyone else at the table. I sat there listening to a version of reality that left me out completely. A server refilled glasses. Silverware clinked. Someone made a joke about supply chains, and the table responded like it was the funniest thing they'd heard all week. I took another sip of water, cold, steady, predictable. Across the table, Chloe's eyes flicked toward me for a split second. Just enough to confirm what I already knew. She saw me. She just didn't care. I leaned back slightly in my chair, letting the noise of the room pass over me. Invisible wasn't new. It was efficient. It kept things simple. Arthur raised his glass again. To real service, he said. The table echoed it. To real service. Glasses clinked. I didn't lift mine. I just sat there listening to the sound. And for a moment, I let myself think about how strange it was that the people who talked the most about honor usually had no idea what it actually looked like. I set my glass down quietly. No one noticed, not even when I stopped listening. Have you ever been the most capable person in the room and still been treated like you don't belong there? Tell me what happened. I kept my face neutral as the laughter from that night followed me out of the restaurant and into the next week. It didn't stop. It just changed locations. By Monday morning, I was back inside a secured room at the Pentagon, reviewing a logistics chain tied to a forward unit rotation. By Monday afternoon, I was standing in my parents' kitchen, holding a printed guest list, like it was my primary mission in life. Arthur didn't ask if I was busy. He never did. Make sure the seating reflects rank, he said, sliding another sheet across the counter. We're not embarrassing ourselves in front of senior command. I glanced at the list. Half the names on it were people I'd briefed indirectly through classified channels. None of them knew that. Got it, I said. He nodded once and walked out already on a call. That was the closest thing to a conversation we'd had all week. By Wednesday, the house looked like a staging area. Catering samples, printed layouts, event planners moving in and out like they were coordinating a military operation, which in a way they were. Chloe stood in the middle of it all, directing everything like she owned the outcome. Harper checked the seating again, she said without looking at me. Declan's team needs to be closer to the front. I adjusted the chart. They already are, I replied. She finally turned her head slightly, just enough to acknowledge I existed. Then make it better, she said. Of course, I made it better, because that's what I do. I optimize systems people don't even realize are broken. This just happened to be one of the few times it involved table numbers instead of live operations. By Friday, I had memorized the entire guest list. Not because I cared, because I couldn't turn that part of my brain off. Rank, background, deployment history, behavioral patterns, it all just stuck. Chloe walked into the room, already dressed like she was about to step onto a stage. Did you confirm the final count, she asked. Yes. Dietary restrictions handled. She nodded satisfied, then paused like she remembered something. Oh, and make sure you stay out of the way during the main event, she added casually. We don't need confusion, I looked at her. I won't be in the way. I know, she said with a small smile. Just stay consistent. Consistent. That was a polite way of saying invisible. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Later that evening, I found myself standing near the back patio where Chloe, Declan, and a group of his SEAL teammates were gathered. I wasn't part of the conversation. I was reviewing final seating adjustments on a tablet. But I could hear everything. You ever get used to it? One of them asked Chloe. Used to what? She replied. The noise, he said. After your first deployment? Chloe shrugged slightly. You don't get used to it, she said. You just stop reacting. A few nods. Declan leaned against the railing, arms crossed, listening more than talking. He wasn't like the others, quieter, more observant, the kind of person who processed before speaking. I noticed that immediately. Then Chloe laughed lightly and tilted her head in my direction. Harper wouldn't last 5 minutes, she said. The group glanced over. I didn't look up. She can't handle pressure, Chloe continued. A gunshot would probably send her under a table. Laughter, easy, casual, like it was obvious, like it was true. I kept scrolling through the seating chart. Didn't react, didn't correct her, because again, I couldn't. But for a split second, something shifted. I felt it before I saw it. A pause in the rhythm of the conversation. I lifted my eyes just enough to catch it. Declan was looking at me, not casually, not dismissively, focused, sharp. He wasn't smiling, he wasn't laughing, he was studying me. And for a brief moment, our eyes met. I didn't look away immediately. I didn't need to. I've seen that look before. It's the look people get when something doesn't add up. Then I dropped my gaze back to the screen. Conversation resumed, but something had changed. A server stepped onto the patio carrying a tray of drinks. Tight space, too many people, bad angle. I noticed it instantly. The way his wrist tilted slightly too far. The imbalance. The inevitable outcome. I shifted my weight before it even happened. The tray clipped the edge of a chair. Glasses tipped. One of them came straight toward me. And before it could hit, I moved. Not dramatically, not fast enough for anyone to fully register. Just enough. A clean step back. Slight turn of the shoulder. Minimal exposure. The wine missed me completely. A few drops hit the floor. That was it. The server froze. "I'm so sorry," he said quickly. "It's fine," I replied. No raised voice, no irritation, just a fact. Because it was fine. But when I straightened up, Declan was still watching me, closer now, eyes narrowed slightly. That same look, except stronger, more certain. "You moved early," he said. It wasn't a question. I met his gaze again. "Lucky timing," I replied. He didn't buy it. I could tell. People like him don't believe in luck, not with things like that. One of his teammates laughed it off. "Or she's just got good reflexes," he said. Declan didn't respond. His attention stayed on me for another second longer than necessary. Then he looked away. But not completely. That kind of attention doesn't just disappear. It files things away. Waits. Chloe stepped in smoothly, reclaiming the moment. "See," she said, smiling at her group. Startle her and she jumps. More laughter. I didn't correct that either. I just turned back to the tablet and adjusted a seating placement that didn't actually need adjusting. Because it gave me something to do. Something controlled. Something predictable. Unlike people. The rest of the evening moved forward without incident. At least on the surface. Plans finalized. Schedules confirmed. Details locked in. Everything exactly where it needed to be. Except one thing. Declan. Every time I crossed the room, I could feel it. That awareness, that quiet observation. He wasn't staring, he wasn't obvious, but he was paying attention, and that was new. By the time I left that night, the air felt different, subtle, but real. Chloe still saw me as background noise. Arthur still saw me as a disappointment. Nothing had changed there, but someone else had started asking questions, not out loud, not yet. But I've worked around enough intelligence officers to recognize the early signs, pattern recognition, inconsistency, suspicion. And for the first time in a long time, someone in that house was looking at me, like I didn't quite fit the story they'd been told. I slipped my phone into my pocket and stepped out of the house before anyone could hand me another task. The night air felt quieter than it should have. Not peaceful, just empty. I got into my car, shut the door, and sat there for a second longer than necessary. The engine was still off. The silence pressed in. Then it happened. A vibration, short, long, short, short. I didn't need to check. That pattern wasn't random. I pulled out my secure phone. No caller ID, no message preview, just a coded ping, Morse, priority channel. That meant one thing. Something had already gone wrong. 10 minutes later, I was back inside a windowless room that didn't care about engagement parties or seating charts. The door sealed behind me automatically. I dropped my bag, logged in, and the system came alive. Multiple feeds opened at once. Satellite overlays, intercepted communications, movement logs. Too much data for most people. Not for me. I scanned fast, filtered faster. A flagged transmission from Kabul caught my attention immediately. Encrypted but sloppy. Whoever sent it didn't expect it to be intercepted. That was their first mistake. I ran it through decryption protocols. Partial success. Enough to get context. Keywords started lining up. Explosive, convoy, timing window. I leaned forward slightly, eyes narrowing as I pulled in additional data. Thermal imaging, drone sweeps, recent troop rotations. And then there it was, a pattern, not obvious, not clean, but real. Someone was setting up an attack. Not random, targeted, precise. I cross-referenced the location. My jaw tightened. I knew that base. I didn't need to check twice. Chloe's old unit had rotated through there 3 months ago. Same routes, same routines. And if nothing had changed, the next unit would be walking straight into it. I pulled up the latest deployment roster. Different names, same risk. I didn't hesitate. I flagged the threat and opened a command channel. No room for second guessing. Every second mattered. I adjusted drone coverage first. shifted surveillance patterns to confirm movement on the ground. Then I rerouted an unmanned unit, closer, lower altitude, riskier, but necessary. The feed sharpened. And that's when I saw it. Heat signatures where there shouldn't be any. Too organized to be random, too still to be civilian. I exhaled slowly, confirmed. I moved to the next step. Evacuation protocol. Not a full withdrawal that would raise alarms and cost time. Just enough to redirect. Subtle, controlled. I issued the command, one click. Somewhere across the world a convoy would change direction without knowing why. That's how it works. They don't ask questions. They follow orders. And sometimes that's the only reason they make it home. The room stayed quiet. No applause, no acknowledgement. Just systems updating in real time. Threat contained, for now. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the screen. Then I reached for my personal phone. I shouldn't have, but I did. I scrolled to Arthur's name, paused, then called. He picked up on the second ring. "What is it?" he said, already impatient. No greeting, no pause. Straight to irritation. "I need to ask you something," I said. A beat of silence, then a sigh. "Make it quick." I kept my voice steady. "I came across a report earlier," I said. "There might be a security gap in one of the forward bases. Kabul region." That was as far as I could go without crossing lines. Another pause, then a short laugh, not amused, dismissive. "Where did you come across that?" he asked. "Just something I read." "That's exactly the problem," he cut in. "You read things, you don't live them." I closed my eyes briefly, kept my tone level. "I'm just saying it might be worth double-checking." "By who?" he snapped. "You." There it was, I should have expected it. Still, it landed. "I'm not trying to overstep," I said. "Then don't," he replied immediately, his voice hardened. "Do you have any idea how many armchair analysts think they understand combat because they've seen a few reports?" I didn't answer. He didn't need one. "You sit behind a desk," he continued. "You move papers around and think that gives you insight into real operations." My grip tightened around the phone. Not enough to shake. Just enough. "This isn't theory," he went on. "This is real life. Real soldiers, real risk." I swallowed the response that wanted to come out. Because I couldn't say it. I couldn't tell him that I had just rerouted a drone to confirm a threat his real soldiers hadn't even seen yet. I couldn't tell him I had already moved people out of danger before he even picked up the phone, so I said nothing, and that made it worse. "Don't ever try to lecture me on battlefield decisions," he said sharply. A loud sound hit the line, his hand, on a table. I could picture it perfectly. "I've spent decades earning the right to make those calls," he added. "You haven't." Silence stretched between us, heavy, final. Then he spoke again, colder this time. "Stay in your lane." The line went dead. I lowered the phone slowly, set it on the desk. The room felt smaller, not physically, just tighter, like the air had shifted. I looked back at the screen. Live feed still running, convoy rerouted, threat bypassed, no casualties, no headlines, no recognition. Exactly how it was supposed to be. I stared at the data for a long moment, then leaned forward and started typing again. Because there was always something else. Another signal, another pattern, another decision waiting to be made. That's the job, not being seen, not being understood. And sometimes saving the same people who would never believe you were capable of it. I adjusted my sleeve as the elevator doors opened into the hotel lobby and stepped into a world that had nothing to do with reality. 5-star everything, polished floors, soft lighting, staff moving like they'd rehearsed every step. And everywhere I looked, uniforms, pressed, decorated, perfect. Medals lined up like proof of worth. I walked past them quietly, heels soft against the marble, already knowing where I belonged in this room. Not at the center, never at the center. The ballroom doors were already open. Inside, the place was packed. Senior officers, their families, people who had spent their lives building reputations that could fill a room like this. Arthur stood near the front, exactly where he wanted to be, visible, respected, admired. Chloe was beside him, of course. Tonight wasn't just her engagement party, it was a showcase. Declan stood next to her, composed, controlled, scanning the room in a way that told me he never fully relaxed in crowded spaces. He noticed me when I walked in. Not openly, just a shift in his posture, a quick glance, then back to neutral. I didn't react. I moved toward the seating area instead, checking the layout without making it obvious. Everything was exactly where I had placed it. Every name, every position, every calculated detail, except mine. I found it near the edge of the room, close to the service entrance, table tucked just far enough away that no one important would accidentally end up there. I stared at the name card for a second, then pulled out the chair and sat down. Of course, consistent. From where I was sitting, I could see everything, just not be part of it. Servers moved in and out behind me, doors swung open and closed quietly. The faint sound of kitchen noise slipped in every time someone passed through. I picked up a glass of water and took a small sip. Cold, clean, predictable. Across the room, the event started to build. Lights dimmed slightly, music softened. Arthur stepped forward. He didn't need a microphone to command attention, but he had one anyway. He tapped it once, unnecessary, but effective. The room quieted. "Thank you all for being here tonight," he began. Voice steady and practiced. I leaned back slightly in my chair. I had heard versions of this speech before. Different audience, same message. "Tonight isn't just about celebration," he continued. "It's about legacy." There it was. He turned slightly toward Chloe and Declan. "My daughter," he said, pride clear in every word, "has dedicated her life to service, to sacrifice, to something bigger than herself." A pause. Applause followed. Chloe lowered her gaze just enough to seem modest. Declan remained still respectful but not performing. Arthur continued. "And Declan," he added, "a man who understands exactly what that kind of commitment means." More applause. Arthur smiled, soaking it in. Then he raised his glass slightly. "They represent the best of what this family stands for," he said. "Strength, discipline, honor." The room responded exactly how it was supposed to. Approving nods, quiet agreement, glasses lifting. I watched it all from the corner, detached, not emotionally, just accurately, because I knew what wasn't being said. I knew what never would be. Dinner was served. Conversation spread across the room in controlled waves. I stayed where I was. No one approached my table. That wasn't an accident. That was design. I took another sip of water and kept my posture relaxed. No tension, no visible reaction, just observation. Across the room, Chloe leaned in toward a group of guests, smiling, engaged. Exactly who they expected her to be. Arthur moved between tables, shaking hands, reinforcing his position in every interaction. Declan spoke less than the others, but he watched more. At one point, his eyes drifted in my direction again. Brief, measured, then gone, but not forgotten. Eventually, Arthur returned to the front. Second speech, this one looser, less structured, more alcohol involved. That's when things got honest, or at least closer to it. He raised his glass again, slightly higher this time. "You know," he said, voice carrying just a bit too far. "It's not every day you get to see your child become exactly what you hoped they would be." The room leaned in. I didn't move. He turned toward Chloe again. "When she was younger," he continued, "I always knew she had it in her." A soft laugh. Even when things got hard, she never backed down. More nods, more approval. Then he shifted, just slightly, enough to change direction. "I guess not everyone turns out that way," he added. There it was, subtle at first, then not at all. He looked across the room, not directly at me, but close enough. Some people, he went on, choose the safe path. A few guests chuckled lightly, encouraging him. He took another sip of his drink. "In this family," he said, "we believe in earning your place, in proving your worth." My hand rested lightly against the side of my glass. Still, controlled. Across the room, a few heads turned, following the direction of his words. "And while my youngest daughter has been out there risking her life," he continued, voice steady, deliberate, "my other daughter." A pause. Not for effect, for choice. He made it anyway. "Has been enjoying the comfort of air-conditioned offices." Laughter. Not loud, but enough. Enough to carry. Enough to land. I didn't move, didn't look up, didn't react, because reacting would have given it weight, and I wasn't going to give him that. Arthur smiled, slightly encouraged. "Sometimes I wonder," he added, "if the warrior blood in this family just skipped one." More laughter, this time less restrained, more confident, because now they knew it was acceptable. I tightened my grip on the glass just enough to feel it, then relaxed it, slow, controlled. Across the room, Chloe didn't stop him. didn't interrupt, didn't even look uncomfortable. She just stood there, letting it happen, because it benefited her. Declan didn't laugh. I noticed that. He didn't speak either, just watched. Again, always watching. The sound of glasses clinking filled the room as Arthur lifted his own once more. "To those who serve for real," he said. The room echoed him, "To those who serve." I didn't raise mine. I didn't need to, because I knew something they didn't. I knew exactly how many people in that room were alive, because of decisions made far away from any battlefield. Decisions made in rooms like the one I worked in. Decisions that didn't come with medals, or speeches, or applause. I rested my hand casually against my coat, fingers brushing lightly against the secure device hidden inside. Still active, still connected, even here, even now, because the job doesn't pause for celebrations, and it definitely doesn't care about recognition. Arthur finished his speech. Applause filled the room. People stood, celebrated, moved on, like nothing had just happened. I stayed seated, calm, silent, exactly where they expected me to be, and exactly where they thought I belonged. I set my glass down just as the laughter started to fade, and something else replaced it. A shift, subtle but noticeable if you knew what to listen for. The doors near the front opened again, and a group of men stepped inside. Their posture gave them away before anything else did. Not active duty, not tonight, but they carried themselves like they hadn't forgotten a single thing. Declan noticed them immediately. This time he didn't hide it. He straightened slightly, attention locking in as they approached. "Didn't think you'd make it," he said, stepping forward. One of them, a broad-shouldered man with a faded scar along his jaw, grinned and pulled him into a quick handshake that turned into a half embrace. "Wouldn't miss this," he said. "Not for you." They spoke like men who had seen the same bad night and made it out together. That kind of bond doesn't need explanation. Chloe stepped in smoothly, smile already in place. "I've heard a lot about you guys," she said. The group acknowledged her politely, respectful, measured, not impressed. They weren't here for her. The conversation pulled a small crowd. People always lean toward stories like that. War stories. Cleaned up just enough to be told in a room like this. I stayed where I was, close enough to hear, far enough to be ignored, exactly where I needed to be. The man with the scar leaned against the edge of a table, glancing around once before speaking. "You remember Kabul," he said to Declan. Declan gave a short nod. "I remember," he replied. A few of the others exchanged looks, the kind that said they all remembered the same moment. "Yeah," the man said. "That night almost wiped us out." The room quieted just a little, not enough to draw attention, just enough to listen. "We were pinned down," another one added. No clear exit, comms were barely holding. I didn't move, didn't react, but every detail lined up instantly in my head. Grid coordinates, timestamps, signal interference patterns. I knew exactly which night they were talking about. Because I had been there, not physically, but closer than they would ever understand. There was no way out. The first man continued, not until someone stepped in. A pause. He exhaled slightly. Didn't even know who it was at the time. Declan's expression shifted. "Barely, but I saw it. Recognition. They called it in over comms," he said quietly. "New route, precise. No hesitation." "Yeah," the man nodded. "And whoever it was, they saw things we didn't." Another voice joined in. "Drone cleared the path before we even got there, like it was already planned. It wasn't luck. No, it wasn't." I took a slow sip of water, kept my eyes on the table, let them talk. Because this part didn't belong to me. It never did. Chloe stepped forward again. Perfect timing, always. "That sounds like the operation my unit supported," she said, voice calm, confident. The group turned toward her. She held their attention easily. "We were running Overwatch in that region," she added, coordinating with multiple teams. "It wasn't a lie, not exactly. Just incomplete," she continued. "It was chaotic," she said, "but we managed to stabilize the situation. Managed." I kept my expression neutral. Across the room, Arthur was watching with clear approval. Of course he was. This was exactly what he wanted. The narrative stayed intact. The hero stayed visible. The details stayed clean. Declan didn't move, didn't agree, didn't interrupt. At least not immediately. He just listened, processing, comparing. And then something clicked. I saw it in his posture before he spoke. A shift forward, slight, intentional. That's not how I remember it, he said. The conversation paused. Chloe turned toward him, still smiling. Memory gets messy in those situations, she replied lightly. Not that messy, Declan said. His tone didn't change, still calm, still controlled, but sharper now. He looked at the group, then back at Chloe. Whoever gave that rote, he continued, they didn't just stabilize anything. Silence tightened around the table. They calculated it, he said, down to the second. No one spoke. They adjusted for movement we hadn't even reported yet. That got attention, real attention, because that detail didn't belong in a public story. Chloe's smile held, but thinner now. And you know that because… she asked. Declan didn't answer right away. He didn't need to. His eyes moved, slowly, across the room, past the center, past the crowd, until they landed on me, in the corner, exactly where I'd been all night. He held my gaze, longer this time. No hesitation, no uncertainty, just focus. And then he spoke. Not to Chloe, not to the group, to me. What were the extraction coordinates that night, he asked. The room didn't go completely silent, but close enough. Enough for people nearby to notice the shift. Enough for it to matter. I didn't look up immediately. I picked up my glass instead. Took a small sip, set it back down. Then raised my eyes to meet his. Calm, neutral, controlled. There were 100 ways to answer that question. Most of them safe, most of them forgettable. I didn't choose those. Depends which route you trusted, I said. His expression didn't change, but his focus sharpened. I continued. Primary path was compromised before you even moved, I added. If you followed it, you wouldn't have made it past the second turn. A pause. No one else spoke. Secondary route only worked, I said, because someone adjusted for the delay in your rear unit. That detail landed. Hard. Because it wasn't public. It wasn't documented anywhere accessible. It was one of those small critical pieces of information that only existed in real time. Or in memory. Declan's jaw tightened slightly. Not in anger, recognition. Rear unit was 30 seconds behind, he said. 28, I replied. Quiet, precise, final. The space between us shifted. He held my gaze for another second, then leaned back slightly, not relaxed, just recalibrating. Around us, the conversation didn't resume right away, because people didn't understand what they had just heard, but they felt it. That subtle sense that something didn't fit the story they thought they knew. Chloe didn't speak. Arthur didn't move. And for the first time that night, I wasn't invisible anymore. Not completely, just enough to be noticed, and just enough to make someone start asking the right questions. I held his gaze for one more second, then looked away just as the room tried to breathe again. No one picked the conversation back up. They couldn't, because something had shifted and they didn't have a name for it yet. That's when the first phone vibrated. Not casually, not like a message, sharp, urgent, repeated. Then another and another. Within seconds, the sound spread across the room like a signal no one could ignore. Different devices. Same pattern. Every senior officer in that ballroom reached for their phone at the same time. That's not coincidence. That's protocol. I didn't move. I didn't need to check mine. I already knew what kind of alert triggered that kind of response. Something big. Something active. Arthur frowned, pulling his phone out and scanning the screen. His posture changed immediately, not confident anymore. Focused. Tense. What is this? Someone near him asked. No idea, Arthur replied, but his tone said otherwise. Around the room, voices dropped. Fragments of information started surfacing. System breach. Multiple access points. Is this internal? No, it's external. The air tightened. Fast. Declan stepped away from the group, already moving into a more controlled position, scanning exits, assessing space without drawing attention to it. Chloe stood still for a moment, watching Arthur, waiting for direction. That was the problem. She needed direction. And Arthur. Arthur didn't have it. Not this time. This doesn't make sense, he muttered, scrolling through whatever limited information he had access to. There's no scheduled, he stopped mid-sentence. Because there wouldn't be. Attacks don't schedule themselves. I reached into my coat slowly, not rushed, not dramatic, just precise. My fingers closed around the device before it even activated. A second later, it rang. Not like the others. Not like anything in that room. A clean, sharp tone, recognizable, specific, Tier 1 secure line, the kind you don't ignore, the kind that doesn't call unless it matters. Every intelligence officer in that room turned. Instinct, training, recognition, they knew that sound. They just didn't expect it to come from me. Arthur's head snapped in my direction. Confusion hit first, then disbelief, then anger. "What are you doing?" he demanded, already moving toward me. I didn't answer. I pulled the device out, glanced at the screen. Priority override, direct channel, no hesitation, I answered. Harper. That's all I said. Because that's all I needed to say. Arthur reached me in 2 steps. His hand shot out, grabbing for the phone. "Have you lost your mind?" he snapped. "Do you have any idea what's happening right now?" I shifted slightly. Minimal movement, just enough. His hand missed. Clean, controlled. Not obvious to most people, but not to everyone. Declan saw it. I could feel it without looking. Arthur didn't care. He tried again, angrier this time. "Give me that," he ordered. "You don't interfere in an active security situation." I stood up, slowly, deliberately, and for the first time that night I didn't let him control the space. I moved his hand aside, not aggressively, just enough force to make a point. Then I looked at him, directly. No hesitation, no softness. "Step back, Colonel," I said. His expression froze, not because of the words, because of the tone, flat, certain, unfamiliar. "You don't have the clearance to be part of this call." Silence hit harder than anything he'd said all night. Arthur stared at me like he'd never seen me before. Like something didn't line up. Like the version of me he had built in his head just broke in real time. "What are you talking about?" he said. Voice lower now, but sharper. "This is a military." I turned away from him completely. Dismissed him because I didn't have time. "Repeat the breach vector," I said into the phone, already moving a few steps away from the table. The voice on the other end responded immediately. Fast, technical, controlled urgency, multiple entry points. "Eastern network clusters compromised. We're seeing data extraction attempts across 3 secured layers." I walked toward a quieter corner of the room. Not hiding, just isolating. "How deep?" I asked. "Level 4, confirmed." Attempting escalation. I processed that instantly. Level 4 meant they were close, too close. Containment status, unstable. Of course it was. I glanced around the room once. People were watching now, not casually, not dismissively, trying to understand what they were looking at. Too late for that. "Shut down external access points," I said. "Redirect internal traffic through secondary channels. Isolate compromised nodes. Yes, ma'am, no hesitation, no question, execution, that's how this works." Behind me I could hear Arthur, still talking, still trying to regain control. "This is unacceptable," he said to someone nearby. "She's interfering with—" He stopped, because no one was listening to him anymore. Not fully, not the way they had before. Because now they were watching me. "Patch me into live feed," I said. A brief delay. Then data started coming through. Even without a screen I could follow it. Pattern recognition, signal flow. They were probing. Testing weaknesses. Looking for access points they shouldn't even know existed. Which meant one thing. This wasn't random. This was informed. "Whoever's doing this knows the structure," I said. "Yes, ma'am," the voice confirmed. "We're tracing, but—" "You won't find them fast enough," I cut in. I adjusted my position slightly, leaning against the edge of a table. Stable, focused. "Cut the system at the root," I said. A pause. That wasn't a small order. "That will shut down. I know what it will shut down," I said. "Do it." Another pause. Shorter this time, because they recognized the voice, the authority, executing. The room stayed frozen around me. No one interrupted. No one stepped in, because they didn't understand what they were watching, but they knew it mattered. Declan stood a few feet away now, closer than before, not interfering, just observing. Arthur didn't move, didn't speak, because for the first time, he didn't know what to say. Containment holding the voice reported. "Good, not over, but stable." "Keep monitoring," I said. "I want real-time updates on any secondary attempts." "Yes, ma'am," the line stayed open. That meant it wasn't finished. It never is. I lowered the phone slightly, didn't turn around immediately, didn't need to, because I could feel it. The shift, the attention, the questions building in that room. And right behind me, Arthur's voice, quieter now, uncertain. "What are you?" I didn't answer, because he wasn't asking the right question. And for the first time in his life, he knew it. I kept the line open, listening to the steady stream of updates as the system stabilized just enough to keep breathing. Then the doors slammed open, not politely, not like guests arriving late, forced. Heavy wood hitting the wall with a sound that cut through the room like a command. Every head turned. Every conversation died instantly. You don't need an announcement when that kind of presence walks in. You feel it. A 4-star general doesn't enter quietly. Thomas Vance stepped into the ballroom like he had somewhere else to be and no time to waste here. 2 armed security officers followed him in scanning the room in synchronized motion. No hesitation, no uncertainty, just control. The entire room stood. Instinct, training, respect. Even the people who didn't know him stood anyway, because they recognized rank when they saw it. Arthur moved first. Of course he did. He straightened his jacket, his posture snapping back into place like this was his moment again. Opportunity, redemption. He walked forward quickly, Chloe right beside him, both of them already shifting into their public roles. Arthur's face lit up with something I hadn't seen all night. Pride, expectation. "General Vance," he called out, voice carrying with confidence he had just regained. "It's an honor to have you here." Vance didn't slow down, didn't acknowledge him, didn't even look at him. He walked straight past, like Arthur wasn't there, like he hadn't spoken at all. The smile on my father's face didn't disappear immediately. It stalled, hung there, waiting for recognition that never came. Chloe stopped too, her expression tightening just slightly as she realized something was off. Vance didn't stop at the center of the room. He didn't turn toward the stage. He didn't engage with any of the senior officers who had just stood up for him. He kept walking, direct, focused, purposeful, toward me. I didn't move. I didn't step forward. I didn't adjust my posture. I just stood where I was, the secure phone still in my hand, the call still active, because I already knew. The moment the doors opened, I knew this wasn't about them. The room stayed silent as he crossed it. Every step recalibrated the atmosphere. Not tense, not chaotic. Just clear, like something important was about to be said, and everyone understood they weren't the ones it was meant for. Arthur turned slowly, confusion spreading across his face. Then disbelief, because now he saw it, where Vance was going. Chloe followed his gaze. So did everyone else. And for the first time that night, every eye in that room landed on me at the same time. Vance stopped a few feet in front of me, close enough to speak without raising his voice, but he didn't lower it. He reached up, removed his glasses, and looked at me directly. No hesitation, no doubt, just confirmation. "Director," he said. The word landed harder than anything else that had happened that night. Not loud, but absolute. He held out a secured tablet. Encrypted, active, urgent. "We need you now," he continued. "The intelligence network is destabilizing. No explanation, no context, because none was needed." I took the tablet without hesitation. My focus shifted instantly. Screen active, data already loading, multiple breach points, wider than the initial report, more aggressive. They weren't just probing anymore, they were pushing. "Who authorized the isolation protocol?" he asked. "I did," I replied, already scanning the data. A brief nod, approval, not surprise. "Good," he said. It bought us time. Behind him, the room didn't move, didn't breathe, because no one understood what they had just heard, except a few, and those few weren't saying anything. Arthur stepped forward again, slower this time, careful, like he wasn't sure where the line was anymore. "General," he said, voice tight, controlled. "I believe there's been some kind of misunderstanding." Vance didn't turn fully, just enough, a glance, cold, measured. "There isn't," he said. 2 words, that was all it took. Arthur stopped, completely, because that wasn't how conversations with him were supposed to go. Not for someone like Arthur, not in a room like this. Chloe looked between us, between me and the general, trying to connect something that didn't make sense. "You're looking for someone else," she said carefully. "My sister, she's not." Vance turned his head slightly, just enough to acknowledge her, then dismissed it immediately. "I know exactly who I'm looking for," he said. No anger, no emphasis, just fact. That made it worse. I kept reading, filtering, prioritizing. They're testing fallback systems now, I said more to myself than anyone else. They've already accessed partial archives, Vance replied. We need containment before escalation. I nodded once. Already moving through options. Shut down tertiary nodes, I said. Force them into a controlled pathway. They'll know we're doing it. They already know we're here, I replied. This just limits what they can take. A pause. Then do it. Behind us, the room still hadn't recovered. Arthur stood frozen, not speaking, not moving, because everything he thought he understood was gone. Chloe's expression cracked. Not dramatically, just enough. Enough to show that something inside her had shifted. That confidence, that certainty. It wasn't holding anymore. Declan didn't move, didn't speak, but his eyes were locked on me. Not confused, not surprised, just confirmed. Like he had already started putting it together before anyone else had the chance. I stepped slightly to the side, giving myself more space to work. Tablet in one hand, phone still active in the other. Patch this into central command, I said into the line. Yes, ma'am. Always the same response. Immediate, clear, no hesitation. Because this wasn't a discussion, this was execution. Arthur finally found his voice again, quieter, unsteady. Director, he repeated. Like the word didn't belong in the same room as me. Like it didn't fit. He looked at me like he was trying to rewrite everything he thought he knew in real time. And failing, because there wasn't enough time. There never is. Vance turned slightly, scanning the room. Once, not impressed, not concerned, just assessing. Then he looked back at me. Can you hold the line, he asked. Not a challenge, a confirmation. Yes, I said, because there was no other answer. He nodded once. That was enough. And just like that, the story they had been telling themselves all night stopped making sense. Not gradually, not softly, it broke, completely. Because the version of me they understood never existed in the first place. I kept my eyes on the tablet as the room went completely still behind me. Not quiet, still. The kind of silence that doesn't come from calm. It comes from people realizing they've missed something important. Data streamed across the screen in clean lines. Breach attempts were narrowing. Containment was holding but barely. Whoever was behind it wasn't amateur. They were adjusting in real time. So was I. Shift the firewall 2 degrees off the predicted pattern, I said into the phone. Make it look unstable. Copy that. They'll push harder if they think it's breaking. Yes, ma'am. I didn't look up. Because I didn't need to. I could feel every set of eyes in that room. And right behind me, Arthur stepped forward. Slow, careful, like approaching something he didn't understand. General, I think there's been a mistake, he said. His voice wasn't confident anymore. It wasn't even controlled. It was searching, trying to find ground that wasn't there. Vance didn't respond. Not immediately. Arthur kept going. She's not, he hesitated, then forced the words out. She's just a desk worker. Administrative. A secretary. The word hung in the air longer than it should have, because this time it didn't land the way he expected. No laughter, no agreement, no support. Just silence. I didn't turn around. I didn't defend myself. I didn't need to, because this part was never mine to say. Vance moved, fast, controlled, but sharp enough to cut through the room. He turned fully toward Arthur, and this time there was no patience in his expression. A secretary, he repeated. His voice didn't rise much, but it didn't need to. It carried, heavy, exact. Arthur opened his mouth, closed it, didn't answer, because there wasn't a version of that sentence that still made sense anymore. Vance stepped closer, not aggressively, just enough to make the distance matter. The person you're calling a secretary? He said, each word deliberate, is the reason multiple units are still operational today. The room didn't move, didn't breathe. Vance didn't stop. She is the one who has been coordinating black-level intelligence operations for the past 2 years. That got attention, real attention, the kind that shifts posture, the kind that resets how people stand. Arthur's face changed, color draining, eyes tightening, trying to process something that refused to fit. Vance's voice hardened. You want a title, he said. Fine. A brief pause. Then she's the one they call the Ghost of Kabul. That name didn't echo. It settled. Deep. Because the people in that room, some of them knew it. Some of them had heard it in briefings, in reports that didn't go into detail, in conversations that stopped short of explanation, a name without a face, until now. Chloe took a step back, small, uncontrolled, like her body reacted before her mind could catch up. No, she said quietly, not denial, refusal, because if that was true, then everything else wasn't. Vance didn't look at her. He kept his focus on Arthur. The useless job you mocked, he continued, is what allowed your daughter's unit to survive an ambush 3 months ago. That hit harder than anything else, because this time, it was personal. Arthur's eyes flicked toward Chloe, then back, then to me, like he was trying to find the version of reality that made more sense. He didn't find it, because it didn't exist. She rerouted the strike, Vance said. She cleared the path. She made the call that kept them alive. I didn't react, didn't look up, didn't acknowledge it, because this wasn't about credit. It never was. Chloe shook her head slightly, trying to reject it, trying to hold on to something that was already gone. That's not possible, she said. We had command. You had orders. Vance cut in, clean, final. You followed them. Silence, heavy, unavoidable. And those orders came from her. No room left for interpretation. I adjusted the tablet slightly, tracking the last active breach attempt as it failed against the new containment layer. They're pulling back, I said into the phone. Maintain pressure. Don't give them a clean exit. Yes, ma'am. I ended the call, lowered the phone, and finally turned around. Not slowly, not dramatically, just enough to face the room. Arthur looked at me like he didn't recognize me, like I was someone else standing in my place. Harper, he said. My name sounded unfamiliar in his voice, like he hadn't used it properly before. Chloe didn't speak, didn't move. Her posture had collapsed just slightly, enough to show the crack. Declan stood still, but his expression had changed. Not questioning anymore, not analyzing, just understanding. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to, because everything that mattered had already been said. Not by me, by someone they couldn't dismiss. That's the difference. People don't question the truth when it comes from authority. They only question it when it comes from someone they've decided not to respect. Arthur tried again, voice quieter now, uncertain. You never said anything, he managed. I held his gaze, calm. Steady, no, I said. Because that part was true. I didn't explain. I didn't justify. I didn't fill the silence for him. Because he didn't deserve that. Vance stepped back slightly, giving me space. Not out of courtesy, out of recognition. The room stayed frozen. No one moved. No one spoke. Because there was nothing left to say that would fix what had just broken. Not tonight, not ever. Chloe's eyes dropped to the medals on her uniform, just for a second, but it was enough. Because now she knew, not where they came from, but what they cost, and who paid it. I shifted my weight slightly, the tablet still in my hand. Work wasn't done. It never is. And neither was this moment. But one thing had already changed. Permanently, they didn't see me as invisible anymore. They saw me clearly, for the first time. And it wasn't something they could ignore. I stood there for a moment, letting the silence do what it needed to do. No one rushed to fix it. No one tried to laugh it off. Because there are moments when people understand instinctively that anything they say will only make it worse. Arthur didn't look like the same man anymore. The confidence was gone. The certainty was gone. All that was left was someone trying to catch up to a reality he had spent years ignoring. Harper, he said again, quieter this time, like he wasn't sure he had the right to say my name. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because this wasn't a conversation. This was consequence. A chair shifted somewhere behind him. Small sound, but it broke the stillness just enough. Declan stepped forward. Not quickly, not dramatically, measured, controlled, the same way he had been, all night. But this time there was no hesitation. He stopped a few feet in front of me, straightened his posture, and then he raised his hand. Clean, precise, perfect. A full military salute. Not casual, not symbolic, formal, intentional. The kind of salute you don't give lightly. The kind you earn. The room didn't react right away, because they didn't understand what they were seeing. But the people who did felt it immediately. That wasn't respect for a story. That was recognition, for authority, for action, for decisions made under pressure that most people in that room would never survive. I held his gaze, then returned the salute. Just as precise, just as controlled, nothing more, nothing less. That was enough. Declan lowered his hand, stepped back, and didn't say a word, because there was nothing he could say that would add to what he had just done. Behind him, Chloe broke. Not loudly at first, just a sharp inhale, like something inside her finally gave way. She took a step back, then another. Her composure collapsed in real time. Tears came fast, uncontrolled, not for attention, not for sympathy, because she couldn't hold it anymore. This doesn't make sense, she said, shaking her head. You didn't? She couldn't finish the sentence, because there wasn't one that worked, not anymore. Her eyes moved over me like she was seeing me for the first time, really seeing me, and realizing how much she had missed, or ignored. Same difference. Arthur tried again. He always does, even when there's nothing left to fix. I didn't know, he said. The words sounded weak. Because they were, I would've. He stopped, because there was no version of that sentence that held up. I watched him quietly, let him struggle with it, let him sit in it, because this wasn't about what he would have done. It was about what he did, repeatedly, consistently, over time. You never told me, he added, almost like that would help. It didn't. I tilted my head slightly, studied him for a second, then answered. No, I said, calm, flat, true, because I hadn't. But that wasn't the point. He took a step closer, careful, like approaching something fragile or dangerous. I need to understand, he said. Why wouldn't you say something? There it was, the question he should have asked years ago. Just not like this. Not now, not after everything. I looked at him, really looked this time. Not as my father, not as anything personal. Just a man who had made a series of choices and was now facing the result. I didn't need you to understand, I said. My voice didn't rise, didn't shift, it didn't have to. I needed you to listen. That landed, harder than anything else I could have said, because he knew. He knew exactly how many times he hadn't. Chloe wiped at her face, but it didn't help. You let me believe, she started. I didn't let her finish. I didn't let you believe anything I said. Not sharp, not aggressive, just clear. You decided what I was without asking. She froze. Because that was true. And truth doesn't give you anywhere to go. Arthur shook his head slightly, still trying to find something to hold on to. Harper, please, he said. That word didn't fit him. Not in this context. Not after everything. But he used it anyway. Just talk to me. I held his gaze, steady, unmoved. Then I spoke. I don't work in the dark, waiting for approval, I said. Every word controlled. Exact. I do it because it's the job. No emotion, no performance, just fact. You're proud of visible medals, I continued. Things people can see, things they can celebrate. I let that sit for half a second, then finished it. I'm proud of keeping people alive long enough to wear them. Silence. Complete. Because there was nothing left to argue with. Nothing left to correct. Nothing left to misunderstand. Arthur's mouth opened slightly, closed again. No words came out, because there weren't any that would fix this. Chloe didn't speak, didn't move. She just stood there facing something she couldn't undo. Declan stayed where he was, still, respectful, aware, but not involved. Because this part didn't belong to him. I shifted the tablet in my hand, checked the screen briefly. Systems were stabilizing, not finished, but controlled. Good enough for now. I stepped past Arthur, not brushing against him, not acknowledging him, just moving forward. Because I had somewhere else to be, something else to do. Vance was already heading toward the exit. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. He knew I'd follow. I always do. Harper, Arthur said one last time, desperate now, not authoritative, not confident, just late. I didn't stop, didn't turn, didn't slow down, because some moments don't get a second version, some words don't get to land twice, and some apologies don't matter when they come after the damage is already done. I walked out of the ballroom without looking back. The noise didn't return behind me. The room stayed quiet, because they didn't know how to recover from something like that. And they shouldn't, not immediately, not easily, that's the point. I stepped into the hallway, the door closing behind me with a soft final sound. The air felt different out here, clear, focused, real. Vance handed me an updated feed without breaking stride. Next phase is already moving, he said. I know, I replied. We kept walking, side by side. No hesitation, no pause. Because whatever happened in that room was already over. Do you think silence like that is enough justice? Or should some people be forced to face the consequences out loud? Share your thoughts below, and if you want more stories about quiet strength and real accountability, make sure you subscribe. I kept walking next to General Vance like nothing had happened. Same pace, same focus, same posture. That's the part people don't see. They think moments like that where everything flips change you instantly. They don't. You still have a job to do. You still have decisions waiting. You still have people depending on you who don't care what just happened in a ballroom. We stepped into a secured hallway, and just like that, the noise from behind us disappeared. Clean, quiet, controlled, the way I prefer things. Vance handed off the tablet to a waiting officer without slowing down. Full containment within the hour, he said. Yes, sir. No one asked questions. They executed. That's how it works when people understand their role. I kept moving, but my mind wasn't on the breach anymore. Not fully, because something else had finally surfaced. Not anger, not relief, just clarity, and clarity is dangerous if you ignore it. I've spent years believing something that sounds right on paper. Stay quiet, do your job, let results speak for themselves. That's what they teach you. That's what gets reinforced over time. And in some environments that works. But here's the part they don't say out loud. Results don't speak. People do. And if you're not the one telling your story, someone else will. Usually wrong, usually loud, usually confident. And people believe confidence, not accuracy. I never corrected my father, not once. Not when he introduced me as the quiet one. Not when he called my work paper pushing. Not even when he laughed about it in front of people who outranked him. I told myself it didn't matter. Because I knew the truth. Because the work mattered more than the credit. Because professionalism meant restraint. That all sounds reasonable. Until you realize something simple. Silence doesn't protect you. It just makes it easier for people to define you however they want. And once they do, they don't update that version. They defend it. I stopped near a glass panel overlooking another secured wing and crossed my arms for a second. Not tired, just thinking. If you had asked me a week ago if I cared what my father thought, I would have said no. And I would have meant it. But that's not the same as saying it didn't affect anything. Because it did. Not my work. Never my work. But how long I allowed the situation to exist. That part was on me. People like to say, just ignore it. That's easy advice when you're not the one living inside it. Ignoring something doesn't make it disappear. It just delays the moment it becomes unavoidable. And when it finally surfaces, it hits harder. Not because it's new, because it's been building. I pushed off the glass and kept walking. Same direction, same pace. Because thinking doesn't stop movement. It just sharpens it. Here's something most people don't want to hear. Being good at what you do is not enough. It should be, but it isn't. You can be the most capable person in the room and still be the least respected. Not because people are smarter than you, because they're louder than you, because they understand something you chose to ignore. Visibility matters, not for ego, for control. I never needed recognition. That part is still true. I don't need applause. I don't need validation. But that doesn't mean I should have accepted being misrepresented. Those are not the same thing. And confusing them costs you. My father didn't misunderstand me by accident. He made a decision, a long time ago. He decided what I was. And everything after that just confirmed it in his mind. That's how people work. They don't update their beliefs unless something forces them to. And if you never challenge it, why would they? Same with Chloe. She didn't wake up one day and choose to underestimate me. She just never had a reason not to. Because I never gave her one. Not directly, not clearly. And people don't question comfortable narratives. They build their identity around them. We turned another corner and I caught my reflection briefly in a glass panel. Same person, nothing dramatic, no visible change. That's another thing people get wrong. Moments like that don't transform you, they reveal you. If you're watching this and you've ever been in a room where you knew more than people gave you credit for, you already understand this. If you've ever had someone reduce your work to something small because they didn't see it, you understand this even better. So here's what I've learned. Not theory, not advice you read online. actual practical things. First, stop explaining yourself to people who already decided who you are. You're not educating them. You're negotiating with their ego. And that never ends well. Second, your work still matters even if no one sees it. That part doesn't change. You don't lower your standards just because someone else has low expectations. You don't perform worse just to match their perception. You stay consistent. Because your work is not for them, it's for the outcome. Third, silence is only strength when it's a choice, not when it's a habit. There's a difference, a big one. If you're staying quiet because it serves a purpose, that's control. If you're staying quiet because it's easier, that's avoidance. And those two things don't lead to the same result. I slowed slightly as we approached another secured door. Hand scan, access granted. We kept moving. I'm not angry at my father. That's the part people expect. It would be easier if I was. Cleaner, more familiar, but I'm not. Because anger means you're still emotionally tied to the outcome. I'm not. I just see it clearly now. And once you see something clearly, you don't need to fight it. You just stop participating in it. That's the real shift. Not proving them wrong, not correcting the past, just deciding you're done playing a role you never agreed to. Vance glanced at me briefly as we walked. You're quieter than usual, he said. I'm thinking, I replied. He nodded once. That was enough. Because at the end of the day, nothing about my job changed. Nothing about my capability changed. The only thing that changed was who understood it. And more importantly, who I allowed to misunderstand it. I adjusted my grip slightly as we stepped into the next operations room. Screens lit up, voices overlapped. Work resumed instantly, exactly where it left off. And I stepped back into it without hesitation. Because no matter what anyone thinks you are, the work still needs to get done. I stepped into the operations room and picked up right where I left off. No pause, no adjustment period. Just another screen, another problem, another set of decisions that didn't care what happened 10 minutes ago. That's the part most people don't understand. Life doesn't slow down just because something important happened to you. It keeps moving, and if you can't keep up, you get replaced. Status. I asked, already scanning the nearest display. Containment holding one of the analysts replied. We're tracking residual activity but no new breach points. Keep pressure on exit channels, I said. I don't want them thinking they got away clean. Yes, ma'am, no hesitation, no confusion, just execution. I moved to the next station, pulling up a secondary feed. Patterns, residual traces. Nothing dramatic, just the kind of quiet follow-up work that prevents a second problem from becoming a bigger one. That's where most people lose control. Not during the crisis. After it. When they think it's over. I leaned slightly against the edge of the console and crossed my arms, focused. But something in my head kept running in the background. Not the breach, not the system. The room I just walked out of. Not emotionally, not personally, just analytically. Because when something breaks that cleanly, you study it. Respect. People talk about it like it's something you earn by saying the right things, by presenting yourself a certain way, by fitting a role. That's not how it works. Not really. Respect isn't given, it's observed. Arthur talked about respect all night. He demanded it, expected it, built his identity around it. But the moment something real showed up, something he didn't control, it disappeared. Because what he had wasn't respect. It was agreement. And those are not the same thing. Declan didn't say a word. He didn't argue. He didn't correct anyone. He just paid attention, and when it mattered, he acted. One salute. That was it. No speech, no explanation, no performance. And somehow, that carried more weight than everything my father said combined. That's how you recognize real respect. It doesn't need volume. It doesn't need validation. It shows up when it counts, and it's obvious when it does. I pulled up another data stream and adjusted a filter. Clean, precise, controlled, the way I like it. Here's something people don't like to admit. A lot of what they call respect is just visibility. If you're seen, you're valued. If you're not, you're ignored. That's not fair, but it's real. And ignoring reality doesn't change it. It just puts you at a disadvantage. I didn't need people to see my work. That part is still true. But I also understand something now that I didn't fully accept before. Being invisible is a tool, not an identity. If you stay invisible all the time, you lose control of how people define you. And once they define you, you're reacting instead of leading. Director, one of the analysts said, pulling me back into the moment. We've got a secondary trace, possible origin point. I stepped closer. Show me. He shifted the screen. I scanned it quickly. Not the source, just a relay. Expected. They're masking, I said. Follow the pattern, not the signal. Yes, ma'am. I straightened slightly. Back to full focus. Because no matter how clear your thoughts get, the work still comes first. But the clarity stays with you, and it changes how you move. I don't need approval. I don't need recognition. That hasn't changed. But I also don't let people misunderstand me by default anymore. That's the difference. If someone wants to understand, they will. If they don't, nothing you say will fix that. So you stop trying, you stop arguing, you stop explaining things to people who benefit from getting it wrong, and you start paying attention to something else. Who notices without being told? Who connects the dots on their own? Who sees the details you don't advertise? Those are the only people worth your time. Declan saw it. Not because I told him, because something didn't add up. And instead of ignoring it, he followed it. That's rare, and it matters. Containment fully stable, the analyst reported. Good, I said. Keep monitoring for another hour. I don't want surprises. Yes, ma'am. I stepped back from the console. The room moved around me with quiet efficiency. No panic, no confusion. Just people doing what they were trained to do. That's what real environments look like. Not speeches, not applause. Execution. There's one more thing people get wrong. They think moments like that, like tonight, are about proving something. They're not. You're not proving your worth. You're revealing it. And if someone only respects you after they're forced to see it, that's not respect. That's correction. And correction comes with a delay, a cost, sometimes too late to matter. I checked the time briefly. Still work to do, always is. I didn't go back to the ballroom. I didn't need closure. I didn't need an apology. Because those things don't change what already happened. And they don't change how I move forward. People always ask if you should give others a second chance, if they realize they were wrong, if they try to fix it. That sounds reasonable. Until you understand something simple, timing matters. Late respect is just guilt with better wording. I picked up a file from the console and started reviewing the next task. No hesitation, no distraction, because that's the job. And the truth is, they didn't change. They just finally saw what was always there.
Final note. This story is a work of fiction, but the valuable lessons we discuss are entirely real and continue to happen to many people every day. If this style isn't for you, that's perfectly okay. Please feel free to look for other content that better suits your needs.